People say I talk about some weird stuff, some far out stuff. But how about that chair that you're sitting in isn't solid? How weird is that? This reality is nothing like we think it is.
When I saw what ICKE is doing, I was a bit jealous on him. Wow, look at what this guy's doing.
I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually.
We are in a period now where speaking your truth is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here. The world needs renegades. Hello. You will have noticed, who couldn't have done, that almost everything today seems to be called smart. Smartphones, smart watches, smart meters, smart motorways in Britain. And this smart phenomenon is the before your eyes emergence of the smart grid. And the smart grid is designed to be based on everything being connected to the internet, including the human mind through AI and microchips, which people in Silicon Valley are openly talking about. And one of the major transformations of human society, according to this smart grid, is going to be smart cars, which are driverless, driven by computer and AI, controlled by the smart grid. Not least so, the system always knows where you are, and it makes sure the computer will not allow you to drive where they don't want you to go. And all this is important background information to the smart motorways that are beginning to expand across Britain. Because it's about driverless cars, what is happening on the motorways, which I'll describe in a second, they have to find another excuse, because they don't want to tell you that's why it's happening. So they tell you it's to make the traffic run better. Well, why doesn't it then? No, it's about driverless cars. And transforming the motorway network of Britain for that phenomenon. So this is what's been going on. If you don't drive on a motorway, you might not have seen it, but of course most people do these days. But anyway, what's been happening since motorways began is there have been lanes of moving traffic, and on the left-hand side has been something they call the hard shoulder, which is an emergency lane. If your car breaks down with fast-moving traffic behind you, you have the ability to get across, if you can, into the hard shoulder, which is an emergency lane which is empty. And so the moving traffic goes past you. It also means that emergency response vehicles, ambulances, fire engines, breakdown vehicles, can get to you either on the motorway or the running lanes of the motorway, or if there is a problem and all the traffic's building up and not moving on the live lanes, they can come up the hard shoulder, which is free, and they can get to you. They can get to someone who's had an accident, who needs urgent treatment. Ambulance crews can do that. If there's a fire, they can get fire engines there, and so on. Now, the word smart is another inversion. And invariably, when you come across something smart, like a smart motorway, it's actually stupid. This is what they're doing. They've started it on a small scale, and now they are starting to play it out more and more. The motorway that I use when I go to the mainland from the Isle of Wight, the M27, they're turning parts of that now into a smart motorway. And this is what it means. You ditch the hard shoulder, the emergency lane, and you make that a running lane. So instead of, say, 3 running lanes, you now have 4, the hard shoulder. This is what they're doing. They're ditching the hard shoulder, they're putting another running lane in there. And this means a number of things. If you are driving along and your car breaks down, you have got nowhere to go. You can't get off the running lanes because there is no alternative to the running lanes. And if something's coming behind you on a running lane, you cannot get across to the hard shoulder. And if the breakdown happens quick enough, bang, you're going to get hit. And this has happened. And from what I gather via people in Highways England who work for them, who are very aware of how dangerous all this is, that actually factored into smart motorways is that it will cause a certain number of deaths, but that's okay. That's factored into the equation, because death is now an equation, right? So, the car or the vehicle or the bus will now stop in a running lane and not be able to escape to an emergency lane. If you don't get hit, then traffic will start building up behind you. Because the way that they are now responding to vehicles that break down with no escape lane is that they have these gantries across the motorways and they put a red X up and say you shouldn't go in that lane because there's a car broken down, okay, or a bus broken down, whatever. And what that does then is vehicles have to go across from, say, 4 lanes into 3, and the traffic builds up. And if there's an accident, for instance, and the traffic stops, how are the emergency services going to get there? They would normally come up the hard shoulder to get to the point of the accident. The police would, the ambulance would, the fire officers if they were required. But now, all the running lanes are all you have. So, without question, people have already died, A, because of no emergency lane hard shoulder to escape to, bang, and emergency services are now faced with a nightmare on smart motorways, stupid motorways, to get to the points of accidents. Like I say, no doubt people have died because ambulance crews couldn't get there quick enough when they could have been saved if they had. Now this is called smart, when it's utterly insane. And what they're doing now is expanding it. And they want the entire motorway network of Britain eventually to be smart, brackets insane, in this way to create the road environment for what they are planning driverless cars. And the point is that these red crosses don't always go up in time. I mean, okay, you're going along in a car, say on the inside lane, which used to be the hard shoulder, and your car breaks down. Your electric stop or something, or you are struggling to keep the vehicle going for whatever reason. And there's a truck coming behind you. Are we really being told that someone is going to stick that red cross on the gantry to get people across from that lane in the period it takes that truck to hit the car? Insanity. Of course there's going to be errors. There have been errors. And the more you play it out across the motorway network, because it's very small at the moment, but it's meant to be the whole thing, the more potential you have for errors and therefore more deaths of innocent people simply because their vehicle's broken down. We have had drivers jailed for fatal accidents in what was the hard shoulder, when it's the system that creates the environment, the situation, which allows this to happen. But the system gets away scot-free. That's why I'm making this video. While the victims of the system take the consequences. And what they've said is, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put little lay-bys every so often along the motorway, and people, if they're in trouble, they can go on them. Yeah, but that means you've got to break down where one of those is. And if you don't, you're buggered. My brother, Paul, has been repairing buses on the hard shoulders of motorways for nigh on 45 years. He travels the motorways every day. He's seen these smart motorways emerge. He's seen the consequences of them. He's an expert, both as a bus mechanic and on motorway driving and motorway dangers and consequences. And there's a video which I will put with this one on davidicke.com, which is an interview with Paul describing the consequences of smart motorways. But he sent me a summary of some of the consequences, and I'm going to read it to you because this is what is not getting out there. While Highways England, the executive people who run it, I mean, not the rank and file people who work for it, they're appalled by it all. But the hierarchy are giving us total crap to justify disasters waiting to happen, and every time smart motorways are expanded, the chances of them happening subsequently increase. So this is what Paul said. I've spoken to 3 different Highways England traffic officers this week. One recently retired and 2 still active. And the information I have received blows wide open the numerous lies we are told about smart motorways and that they care about safety. Firstly, the current rollout is not a replication of the test area of the M42. One we already know is the spacing of the emergency refuges, what I talked about, these laybys, from half a mile apart to 1.5 miles apart. But I've also been informed that the camera coverage is well below that of the test area also, and that indeed there are numerous sections that have invisible blind spots. So how is a broken down vehicle going to be seen in those blind spots and a warning cross put up on the gantry? There is also the assertion that as soon as you break down, we know you are there. This is again totally untrue, Paul says. Yes, there are sensors implanted in the carriageway, but they are at very well spaced intervals, generally under a gantry, and these are for monitoring traffic flow. There is no continuous sensor to detect a solitary stationary vehicle, as they would have us believe, so if you have a breakdown in a live carriageway, you are totally at the mercy of following traffic. The signage management has also deteriorated from an already very low bar of late to even lower. I have witnessed, he said, a plethora of signs either left on with nothing there, or signs lit advising of an incident and speed restriction, only to find the next gantry blank, leaving everyone in limbo, as there is no confirmation whether the restriction is still in force or has ended, and this includes the red X, which now attracts points on your license, and a fine, and so delays and chaos ensue. Perhaps the most unbelievable story, though, is that I have heard today directly from two serving traffic officers, one of them said that he's never seen such, or in fact, both of them said they've never seen such a sea change in an organisation, talking about Highways England, which was once safety orientated, to one that now doesn't care, and I quite believe it as I witness it daily myself, and these are the people operating at the sharp end out on the motorway. So here you have employees of Highways England who are going out every day on the motorway and having to deal with situations, who are saying that Highways England has gone through a seed change in which safety has gone out of the window. Now, do we need any confirmation of that, given what I've just described about smart motorways and how unsafe they clearly are? But hey, good for driverless cars. I have also, Paul says, been informed that Highways England are now forcing single-person patrols instead of the double-manned patrols that have always been the norm. So, in addition to making the motorways more dangerous by the introduction of smart, they are now adding to the dangers by having single-person patrols, where, you know, one would look out for the other, so it's dangerous for the single person as well. Having also been informed, they have been told if they refuse the single person operation, they face dismissal, something I am told the majority are against, but which, as always, some are prepared to do for the brownie points, as Paul says, which of course can be posted on their coffin. So not only are they determined to put motorists' lives at risk, they want to make it even more dangerous for their own staff. And he sent me another email then, Paul, about an experience he's had this week. Seen a situation this week where there had been an accident on the opposite side of the carriageway. Traffic was solid, and then way back down the queue was an ambulance with blue lights flashing, trying to fight its way through, creating the potential life-threatening delay. When I say they are a disaster, I mean it. There is no problem when everything is running smoothly. The disaster is when something goes wrong. Personally, I don't think we should be killing people for the crime of having a breakdown, which is what is happening, he says, time and time again. It's obvious that Highways England management are aware people have seen through the bullshit propaganda, he said, as their statements are getting more ludicrous by the week. And he quotes a person I'm going to quote in a minute, who actually says that smart motorways are safer than they were before. The other thing they claim, Paul says, is that journeys are faster, which in reality they are not, when one minor breakdown that would have been on the hard shoulder, inconveniencing no one, now causes a major delay because it is now blocking a live lane. You get all these massive queues of traffic when someone breaks down in a live lane, which before they'd be in the hard shoulder emergency lane, people just carry on with their lives. Oh no, but it's much quicker. If we surveyed the motoring public, he says, and asked the question, would you rather get somewhere just that tiny bit quicker, knowing that someone may be killed, or get there a little bit slower, knowing everyone is safe, what do you think the answer would be? And that is exactly what smart comes down to, even though the quicker journey is a fantasy in my experience, as they are overall actually slower most of the time, because there is always something going wrong, which creates chaos. So let's come to this guy who must have spoken these words with his fingers crossed. Smart motorways without hard shoulders are safer, claims Highways England, despite emergency services and driving groups blasting them as dangerous, i.e. half a brain cell and you'll see that they're dangerous. Mac Pates, the East Midlands Regional Traffic Operations Manager for Highways England, said hard shoulders are not a hospitable place for drivers to be, and smart motorways are as safe, if not safer, without them. So a hard shoulder that is not a running lane and gives you the opportunity to escape the running lanes are not hospitable places. But breaking down in a running lane where there's nowhere to escape, well, that's okay. Just as safe, maybe even safer. That's despite, the story says, recent cases of motorists being killed on sections of smart motorway, vehicle recovery operations stating that it puts their breakdown technicians in danger. Yeah, people like my brother. And police and ambulance services complaining they make it more difficult for them to attend emergencies. Apart from that, it's fine. It's definitely an upgrade. Mr. Pates was talking to the BBC as part of a new feature looking into smart motorways and how they work. He said the need for hard shoulders had become redundant because modern cars are now fitted with technology that warns the driver when they're about to break down, giving them plenty of time to take action and exit a motorway. This is the movement to driverless cars, the stepping stone. So why, when I was on the mainland last week, driving around, going on quite a few motorways, did I see broken down vehicles? On the hard shoulder where they existed. Because cars do break down, and buses break down, and trucks break down. He argued, this guy, that vehicles are more reliable today than ever before, and the chances of suffering a reliability issue are at an all-time low. Try telling that to the families of the dead people who've died already on smart motorways, mate. Have a chat with them, see what they think about it. Instead of a permanent hard shoulder, existing smart motorways have emergency refuge areas every 1.55 miles, 2.5 kilometres, which some organisations say is not enough. Well, of course it's not enough, because if you break down between them, you've had it. They might as well not be there. The hard shoulder, always there, wherever you went. AA President Edmund King previously argued improving capacity and easing congestion on our motorways is the key for the economy, but not at the expense of safety. The gap between emergency refuge areas has been a major concern. There is currently more than 100 miles of smart motorways in England, with more due to be installed, and the idea is that they are everywhere. So, concerns regarding the safety of smart motorways were heightened by 2 deaths that took place on the same section of smart motorway on the M1 in Derbyshire. In March, 83-year-old Derek Jacobs died after his van came to a halt, possibly due to a mechanical problem, police said, on a section or motorway without a hard shoulder. Emergency services, another person too. Just 6 months earlier, a woman was killed after a breakdown on the very same stretch of road. And as, of course, smart motorways expand across the network, you're going to see more and more and more and more of this. And one day, inevitably, there's going to be a catastrophe, say with a bus full of kids or something. And what are they going to say then? Because it's the agenda, because it's for driverless cars, not safety, they'll find some bullshit excuse to keep the agenda going, despite a catastrophe. But people will then realise that their lives mean nothing to Highways England hierarchy, and more to the point, that which controls that. Emergency services staff and vehicle recovery mechanics have also been critical of smart motorways, saying that they can make it difficult for them to respond to urgent calls and conduct their jobs safely. PC Stuart King from the Motorway Police said in a BBC interview, "We have to force our way through the small gaps between lorries, cars, and whereas before we would use the hard shoulder to get there much quicker, we are now stuck." Dave Poole, a motorway recovery mechanic, said the removal of hard shoulders puts him and fellow breakdown services providers at risk. Well, of course it does. And there was an example, just one, of a massive build-up of traffic because of a technical glitch in the computer system of the gantries. On June 20th, the system automatically closed 3 lanes on a stretch of motorway between Leicester and Nottingham for no reason, causing a huge jam for miles. So if you're going to get that level of system error, are we really supposed to believe that when someone breaks down, immediately that system is going to alert everybody in the time necessary? If something's coming behind you, immediately behind you, you haven't got any time. Bang. And this is a former police officer warning a council leader over safety concerns about the M27. This is the one across, comes across just outside Portsmouth. I use that all the time when I'm on the mainland. A former police officer has warned a council leader over safety concerns about the M27 smart motorway scheme, which is now being played out. Saw it the other day. After an MP's report called for the schemes to be stopped. Andy Snow has seen his fair share of accidents and close calls on roads and smart motorways during his time as an officer, and he told Fareham Borough Council leader, Councillor Sean Woodward, about his worries. The 61-year-old said, "I have experienced these accidents, and my colleague was nearly hit on the M60 smart motorway. These schemes..." Someone actually on the ground who's seen it, like my brother, These schemes are not safe and people will die. They are dying. The M27 at rush hour is extremely busy, and if you break down at 8:30 a.m. in the third lane, there is no hard shoulder and it will be extremely dangerous, and I told Sean Woodward this previously, the police officer said. The £1.5 billion scheme by Highways England will see the hard shoulder from junction 4 to junction 11 for Fareham converted into an extra lane with technology to manage the flow of traffic and reduce congestion. So they claim. Tell the people caught in that jam between Leicester and Nottingham. Whew. It comes as a group of cross-party MPs say smart motorway schemes should be halted due to no hard shoulder, putting motorists and road workers at risk. Andy said, "I have gone back to Councillor Woodward with this, and he said he has spoken with Highways England and they are going ahead with the scheme. It seems ludicrous to me," said the police officer, "as this flies in the face of what people from government are saying. Mr. Snow said figures from the MP's report showed there were 16 crashes last year on the 100 miles of smart motorway all-lane running sections, while there were 29 similar crashes with vehicles parked on the hard shoulder on the entirety of the rest of the motorway network of 1,800 miles in England." So 16 in 100 miles compared with 29 in 1,800 miles. What are those figures going to be of motorway crashes when this smart motorway madness is played out across the entire network? It doesn't bear thinking about. And crazy as it is, the people behind it are not stupid enough not to know that. But they get their network prepared for driverless cars. So who gives a damn about the consequences? The police officer said this just shows in statistics how dangerous these roads are, and all M27 road users will know how many accidents we have had already, and this will only increase. And he talked about putting a price on human life. Now, of course, vehicles don't break down. Ooh, they're fantastic now. Never see a breakdown. Well, here's a recent one. School bus bursts into flames as children forced to flee from the inferno. A group of school children were forced to flee from a bus after it burst into flames while travelling through Essex. 8 pupils from the Southend High School for Girls were on board when the fire broke out on the A127 near Wickford. Dramatic pictures, so the bus was completely destroyed in the blaze. All of the children were evacuated safely. And what would have happened had that bus been travelling down a smart motorway? How would the emergency services have got there with all the traffic that would have built up from it? And what are the chances of the bus being hit from behind when it immediately stopped? You know, one of the great penny drops that allows you to see the world we live in is that authority and that which controls authority does not care about you. There is an agenda which is playing out. And if people have to take the consequences of that agenda, then so be it. Who cares, they say, as long as we get our agenda. So people are worried about driverless cars. They say, well, driverless cars, well, you know, they're going to be dangerous. Driverless cars are already dangerous by the road preparations for driverless cars. And I say to people who work for Highways England, you know, the rank and file people who can see the utter madness of it, who are now being told you're going to have single crews and not go with 2 people crews anymore, so adding to the danger to them. Don't do it. And to those who do it anyway, they should remember this is not where it ends. This is just the start. What are they going to enforce upon you next? You need to stand up. I know it's difficult, but stand up and say, en masse, we're not having it. If Highways England suddenly don't have people who are going to work, if they're forced to have single person operation, then Highways England will have no choice but to continue 2 people operation. They can't sack you all. And where's the trade unions in this? Too busy wondering about whether to call someone he, she, or they. And the public. All these tens of millions of people in Britain whose lives, when they go on these smart motorways, are being put at much greater risk, obviously. By what? By who? A handful of people who are dictating that to them with no care about their safety. Are we going to stand for that? Are we going to have that? What are we going to give them hell? And give the members of Parliament hell who don't stand up and bring an end to this? Like always, the tail is wagging the dog more. The tail is wagging the elephant. It's in our power, if we care enough about our own safety, the safety of our loved ones, we'll come together and we'll put an end to this nonsense before a real, massive, multiple catastrophe ensues, because that is inevitable.